Hernandez has taken up a prior suit in Los Angeles Superior Court to challenge the constitutionality of Measure R, which was passed by LA voters in 2007. What was the genesis of this initiative? Who started it, and why, we ask him?
The lobbyists in Los Angeles, the lobbyists that actually do business with the city of Los Angeles, could see that the Ethics Commission in Los Angeles was beginning to become a little bit more stringent, holding elected officials and lobbyists a little bit more accountable. So the lobbyists got together and formed an organization called Citizens for Reform. They went to the special interests and said, here, what we're going to do is we're going to set the template for how lobbyists do business with the city. It's kind of like the fox is in charge of the hen house.
With his analogy of the fox in charge of the hen house, is Mr. Hernandez talking about the special interests and lobbyists that do business with the fat cats?
In reality, the lobbyists are the fat cats. The fat cats that sometimes when we say fat cats, we're thinking of the politicians. But many of these lobbyists, especially in Los Angeles, are the ones who get the politicians elected to do their bidding. And so, yes, we are talking about the politicians, but we're talking about the individuals, the developers that get the special contracts, the developers that just built the LAPD downtown facility for $500 million. So we're talking about a lot of money.
So what exactly did these fat cats do in regards to crafting Proposition R? Mr. Hernandez explains.
They created new guidelines as to when a lobbyist becomes a lobbyist. And by manipulating the guidelines, many lobbyists don't have to register. They're able to do work behind the scenes in those smoke-filled backroom doors, and provided they don't reach a certain hourly on a specific issue, they don't have to register.
And if they didn't have to register as lobbyists, they weren't officially lobbyists. That means they could unofficially schmooze the council members with dinners, event tickets, and all the goodies that LA Mayor Villaraigosa got in trouble for.
The lobbyists who created this ballot initiative wanted it to seem as though it was more of a ethical, above-board proposal, so they brought in the League of Women Voters of Los Angeles and the LA Area Chamber of Commerce and presented those two organizations that on the surface people have trust and confidence in. They have a track record that they could look at, and said these are the two organizations that sponsored this ballot proposal. They're the icing on the cake, but the cake itself is the lobbyists.
The lobbyists who wrote the bill knew it would be a hard sell to the public, so they sought reinforcements to allay the fears of those who knew better.
They then went to Eric Garcetti, who's the president of the city council, and submitted a letter to Eric. Eric contacted the city clerk because in order for the city council to hear an issue and vote on it, a city council agenda item number has to be assigned, and it needs to follow the process and put it on the agenda. And all of that is very boring, except in the details of all of that. Here we're talking about ethics reform. Eric Garcetti's father, Gil Garcetti, was the president of the Ethics Commission. Now, in order to hear and to discuss this, they needed a quorum at the Ethics Commission.
Only one person needed to be absent, not to have a quorum. Who do you think that was?
Gil Garcetti, Eric's father. So the Ethics Commission, they walked through saying, we're taking this to the city council, we have no time, we're on a deadline. You don't have a quorum, you can't review it.
But this initiative was even titled Ethics Reform, and it was never reviewed by the LA City Ethics Commission. Mr. Hernandez explains.
What that ethics reform did is it also changed the amount of terms a city council member could have in office. So Eric Garcetti, who was carrying the proposal, who his father doesn't show up for the Ethics Commission meeting, it gets direct benefit of 4 more years in office. There's a conflict right there.
So, why should the Ethics Commission be consulted about a direct conflict of interest? Obviously, they have better things to do. So the initiative continued on its way.
So the city clerk gives it a title, Ethics Reform and Term Limit Extension Ballot Initiative. And there's the key. It's the word initiative. It gives it a city council file number. It goes to the city council. While they're preparing to hear it, the city attorney issues a legal opinion saying this is unconstitutional. In California, if you're to put a ballot initiative on the ballot, you can only be a single issue. You can't have two separate issues, which says to the voter, if you vote for this, you're giving me this.
Well now, the city attorney said no. This is against the rules. You can't do this. You think that stopped him? They simply ignored the city attorney and moved it forward.
The city council adopted it. They voted on that particular agenda item. They sent it to the city attorney, who drew up the ballot proposal, what was going to appear on the ballot, and they placed it on the ballot. And what happened was there was an individual that saw that this was unconstitutional. Whether one agreed with term limits or not, whether one agreed with the ethics reform or not, because it was bundling two items on the same proposal, a lawsuit was filed. And what happened, though, was that the city of Los Angeles appealed the initial ruling.
Mr. Hernandez explains that the initial ruling also went against the city.
I think Judge O'Brien was the first judge to see this quagmire and said, wait a minute, this is unconstitutional. Took it off the ballot. The city appealed, and the Court of Appeals gave them a hearing date, but after the date of the election. And consequently, what the city petitioned the court is that let's put it back on the ballot, so that we don't want to disenfranchise the voters. So this will allow them to vote on it, and if the appellate court rules it unconstitutional, then we'll void the election.
The ballot summary was written with idyllic buzzwords to mislead the voters into supporting it. Here's what it said. Shall the charter be amended and ordinance adopted to change council member terms to 3 terms, restrict lobbyists from making campaign contributions, gifts, and becoming commissioners, revise lobbyist registration thresholds, require contractors to certify compliance with lobbying laws? How could anybody vote against this wonderful charter amendment? When we come back, Mr. Hernandez will explain the dark underside of this measure. We'll be right back.
In the government, there's a phrase used to restrict access to information. That phrase, need to know. At fulldisclosure.net, we want you to have all the information you need to be an informed citizen, unlimited access to all the information we've gathered on our TV show, and if you can't watch us on your local cable station, streaming video of complete shows when you want them. Fulldisclosure.net, when you need to know the news behind the news.
Welcome back to Full Disclosure. We're talking with LA civic activist David Hernandez about his battle over Proposition R. His small grassroots movement is fighting the major power brokers of Los Angeles.
This represents the worst of Los Angeles. There is so much corruption involved in this, and there's so much misleading information and smoke and mirrors and special interest groups, and really the corrupting of the very fabric of what our checks and balances and our justice system is about. And so having an unlimited supply of money, only having grassroots and a certain amount of media opposition, this was passed. The measure was passed. It was I think it was like 325,000 voted in favor out of 4 million, and there were with no budget, but with the awareness that was created by the limited media, you had over 250,000 people voted against it. So it passed.
But what happened to the lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of the initiative, we ask him.
Once it passed, the original proponent of the legal challenge said, well, if the people are stupid enough to be fooled, then I'm withdrawing my case. He withdrew his case, and since there was no case, the appellate court never heard the case, and it went forward. And at that time, I said, wait a minute. either it's unconstitutional or not. I mean, I really have no dog in the fight other than I'm a resident of the state of California and a resident of the city. If it's constitutional, fine. If it isn't, then it needs to be challenged. So that's when I took up the challenge. It went to court. We named the City of Los Angeles, the City Council, and also the County of Los Angeles. And there's where the key is with this particular action here, because it's the County of Los Angeles that certifies the election.
So Mr. Hernandez took up the sword and resumed the fight in the Los Angeles Superior Court. It should have been a slam dunk. Judge O'Brien had already ruled the initiative unconstitutional. But this time, the judge hearing the case was none other than Judge David Yaffe.
What happened was we went to court. Judge Yaffe was the judge that oversaw the hearing. The city presented its case. We presented our case, and we said, this clearly violates the bundling. Referred to Judge O'Brien's prior ruling, and the city's strategy changed and said this is a ballot measure. It's not a ballot initiative, and that since it's there, the word initiative does not appear in the ballot title and summary, that it's not a ballot initiative.
Initiative? Measure? What's the difference? It sounds like mere semantics. But legally, there's a critically important difference of which the city attorneys took full advantage.
As a chartered city, the City of Los Angeles has the ability to place a ballot measure on the ballot. Now, I don't disagree with that. But what they did do was when it went to City Council, they gave it a City Council file number and a title. And it specifically said ballot measure initiative. The letter that Eric Garcetti, his correspondence to Martinez, the city clerk, said, please accept this ballot initiative proposal from the League of Women Voters of the LA Area Chamber of Commerce. However, the judge, even though we presented the follow-up argument that here's where it says initiative, this is what they voted on. If they didn't vote on this agenda item, then show us where they voted to put this particular thing on the ballot. The judge ruled in favor of the city council and the city.
Even though they had limited resources, Mr. Hernandez took the fight up to the next level.
Now remember, we're grassroots. We're going up against the power structure of the City of Los Angeles. With the help of a couple of organizations, U.S. Term Limits and Judicial Watch, we were able to take the course to the Second Court of Appeals. The Second Court of Appeals looked at our argument, looked at the city's argument, and the Second Court of Appeals refused to overturn the lower court's decision.
That was it. It takes a lot of money to appeal all the way up to the California Supreme Court, but then Mr. Hernandez heard about Dr. Richard I. Fine on the Full Disclosure Program and watched the video showing Dr. Fine accusing the judges of taking bribes from the county. This revelation presented new possibilities.
So when I looked at that and I saw the basis of his argument that the judge in his case, which happened to be the judge in my case, involving a case involving the County of Los Angeles, I learned that there was more going on than meets the eye.
What he learned was that the judges were receiving illegal payments from Los Angeles County, who was directly involved in the case. He began investigating the payments to verify Dr. Fine's allegations. He was shocked by what he found.
When we received a response to our request from the county auditor, we find out that the amount was almost $860,000.
Paid to who?
Paid to Judge Yaffe. And that is, and here he is sitting on a case involving the County of Los Angeles, the City of Los Angeles, the City Council, and by his conflict of interest, he had, by law, he should have recused himself from that case.
We pressed Mr. Hernandez why was Los Angeles County involved in this case.
In this particular case, it is the County of Los Angeles that certifies the election. The county was named as the respondents in this case, along with the city and the City Council. because what you are relying on, the register recorder, you're relying on the individuals whose duty, and it's not just their responsibility, it is their duty to see that the election process, the integrity of it, is maintained. And so in this particular case, you have the County of Los Angeles as a respondent who was represented in court. I mean, they were there with their attorneys. And here we are, our case is being adjudicated by an individual who, as it turns out, has been receiving illegal payments from the County of Los Angeles going back almost to 1986.
So what should Judge Yaffe have done, we ask him?
The parties have an obligation to disclose if there is a conflict of interest. That extends to the judge. And in this case, the judge did not do that. Now, I guarantee you 99% of the population had no idea of this and of that conflict, or that the judges were receiving those illegal payments. And what really, I think, brought it to light prior to this particular action was when the state of California passed its 2009 budget. And Darrell Steinberg, the chair of the Senate and the Assembly, inserted a provision giving the judges immunity from prosecution for collecting these illegal payments. Now, if they weren't doing anything wrong, why would they need immunity from prosecution? That's not civil, that's criminal. But that extended to all California judges that received those illegal payments here in the County of Los Angeles. And when the budget was signed by then Governor Schwarzenegger, that went into effect. And so, well, Judge Yaffe cannot be held criminally liable. The fact is that that does not give them exemption from the rules that govern courtroom conduct. So that brings us to what I'm doing now, is that I have filed a notice to vacate and set aside the judge's orders in this particular case.
And what effect would that have?
Well, what we attempted to do at the appellate court in having his judgment set aside, this will do it right at the very core, the very basis of where the argument begins. And so setting his judgment aside, then we can refile, we can go in front of another judge, we can reinforce our arguments that, well, the City of Los Angeles, the City Council, was within their rights to put a ballot measure on the ballot. What they did, in fact, though, was put a ballot initiative. And by doing so, they violated the state constitution.
To clarify, the ballot initiative process doesn't allow two issues to be bundled, but the ballot measure would allow it. Would it mean then that he would be back to square one, as if the initiative had never passed?
Well, no. The initiative passed. However, we would be back to square one with the legal challenge. What our focus is going to be is to say, yes, we agree with the City of Los Angeles. They have the ability to put a ballot measure on the ballot, but that's not what they did. And so the timing is perfect, because one of the arguments that the city used at this particular time was that the city council members who were going to receive the third year or the third term in office had already formed committees and were starting to collect money from individuals for that third term. And so the next election cycle for the city council is in 2013. So this gives us plenty of time to have this adjudicated, and once it is found unconstitutional, as it is, many of the city council members will not find a third term in office waiting for them.
So does he stand a chance of getting this turned around? Is Mr. Hernandez committed enough to fight to the end? Find out next. We'll be right back.
For the news behind the news, wherever and whenever you want it, go to fulldisclosure.net and get programs on topics affecting you, weekly updates and alerts on hot topics, video streaming of Full Disclosure episodes. It's award-winning, hard-hitting, corruption-fighting news coverage, and it's only available at fulldisclosure.net. fulldisclosure.net, the news behind the news.
Welcome back to Full Disclosure. We're talking with David Hernandez about his court case challenging Proposition R. We ask him to explain what he sees as the problem with the judge being paid a substantial fee by the county.
The judge's responsibility to have this on a level playing field made it even more vital of an issue this time, because you have the grassroots constituents is challenging the big political machines. Now, the very foundation of our country, our judicial system, was based on the ability of the individual to challenge the power structure for a resolution that was not only legal but fair and accessible.
So this issue has grown beyond his challenge to Proposition R. He's questioning the integrity of the legal system in Los Angeles.
I think that's the bigger picture with Proposition R. Whether it's 3 terms in office or 2 terms in office, whether you have to work so many hours as a lobbyist before you have to register, yes, those are important issues. But they are superseded by the corruption of the very fabric of the integrity of the system that we have.
How widespread is the problem, we ask him, and what course does he have now that he's aware of the situation?
The Judicial Council has already clarified all of the judges in Los Angeles County have been receiving the illegal payments. Now, where does that put an individual who has a case against the county, like myself? We may have to change venues to a different county. And if that's the case, we're willing to do that, because we didn't start down this path a few years ago as a lark or as an attention getter. We started because it clearly, once the facts were investigated and the enormity of the corruption involved, once that was discovered, it either you stick with it to the end or you turn your back.
Mr. Hernandez is not inclined to turn his back, and if he is ultimately successful in his case, what will happen to the politicians here in Los Angeles?
Well, we know when I first challenged this, the political landscape, the politicians were very threatened. The immediate effect, it was, well, wait a minute. Maybe we do have to listen to the little people some of the time.
He's confident that he's eventually going to win. Does he think he can get the LA Superior Court judges to disclose their conflict of interest in the courtroom?
Maybe not willingly, but the cat's out of the bag. I mean, as soon as that immunity clause went into the budget, they could no longer deny that something was taking place that they needed immunity from prosecution for. This is going to spread like wildfire. And a judge going forward, since the judge no longer has the fear of prosecution, it's in the judge's best interest to say, oh, by the way, I want everyone to know, all the parties involved, that I have received so many hundreds of thousands of dollars from one of the parties in the case. There's going to be a lot of requests for changes of venue. So yeah, I think that the judges are going to be more open, as they should have been, about receiving or about having a conflict with the parties involved.
We ask him, why is he so passionate about this issue?
We're a part of the process. We have rights, and I'm constantly hearing people talking about their rights. But along with those rights come responsibilities. And I think there's why I'm stuck in this, is because I know that I have a responsibility to do it. And if I choose not to, then I'm making a conscious decision to be a part of this process which has been allowed to be so corrupt and so dysfunctional and so much of a disservice to the people of the community.
As he embarks on this historic legal challenge, we ask him what he suggests people should do to restore integrity to our city council, our county courthouses, and our electoral system.
There is a lot at stake. And while everyone enjoys the rights that we have, more people need to engage in the responsibility that comes with those rights. And so I would encourage everyone that believes that the justice system needs to be held to a higher standard to be involved in the support of this.
From research conducted by Full Disclosure, it has been learned that by serving a third term, Los Angeles City Council members would be eligible for lifetime pensions. This information was not disclosed in the ballot measure language, which should have informed the public that by voting to approve Measure R, they would be voting to adopt this tremendous fiscal obligation. We want to thank David Hernandez for appearing on Full Disclosure today. We want to know what you, the viewers, think. Do you think the supposedly separate branches of government, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branch, are conspiring to take away the power of the people? Please call our Full Disclosure Town Hall number and tell us what you think at 1-800-867-7777. That's 1-800-867-7777. And if you leave your name and number, we'll get back to you. Or you can log on to our website at fulldisclosure.net and leave your opinion there. And if you leave your email address, we'll be happy to respond. Please join us for part 2 of this series, where Mr. Hernandez will show how the devious politicians, while protected by the courts, have joined with the special interests to ensure their political careers in perpetuity. I'm Leslie Dutton. Thank you.
To respond to this question or comment on this program, please call 800-867-7777 or visit fulldisclosure.net. Transcripts or DVD copies of this program are also available on our website. Full Disclosure, the news behind the news.
You have the judges receiving compensation, not their paychecks, but bonuses in direct violation of the state constitution, sitting on a case that not only includes the city of Los Angeles, but the county, and having to do with an issue with regards to the state constitution, which they're already violating.
Civic leader David Hernandez has taken his fight to reverse Measure R to court and is being frustrated by the injustice of our justice system. You'll be amazed at how the politicians and the judges have joined forces to stop him. Next on Full Disclosure.
Relentless, probing, fearless. This is Emmy Award-winning Full Disclosure with Leslie Dutton, bringing you the truth by revealing the news behind the news.
Hello, I'm Leslie Dutton. Today on Full Disclosure, we're bringing you the news behind the news in part 2 of our interview with David Hernandez, a longtime civic leader. Mr. Hernandez has filed a lawsuit to challenge the judicial corruption that allowed a fatally flawed and deceptive Measure R to be passed in 2007.
Proposition R was very interesting, to say the least. I'll be kind. A very interesting scheme that was concocted by the special interest lobbyists in the city of Los Angeles. And what they did was they wanted to do a preemptive strike on the City Ethics Commission and how they deal with campaign contributions and lobbyists.
So what exactly did the special interests hope to accomplish